company's computer systems. More details at srnnews.com.
Place that provides customers with access to licensed security professionals on demand. Let's face it, you have a lot to do running your business, and security, well, that's our business. We take the hassle out of searching, vetting, and scheduling private security guards for your unique needs. Just tell us what you need, when you need it, and we'll handle the rest. Guard Market Security Service partners are carefully screened and thoroughly vetted to meet the demanding needs of our diverse client base. Using advanced technology, we match you with the most qualified service provider based upon your specific needs and geographic requirements. For more information, you can visit our website at www.theguardmarket.com and call Andrew at 732-266-9344 with your service requests today. The Guard Market, security on demand.
Well, and a good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're back here at Three Rivers Broadcasting. Slight hiccup there at the end of the polka show. Hey, these technical difficulties used to happen in WGPA all the time. And our other stops as well. But it's 6 o'clock in the evening. We've got to make up the corner kick because we didn't get to do it on Monday night. Mom and Dad were in town. I haven't seen my mother in 6 months, so it was Christmas the last time. So, hey, we postponed the show because we could go out to dinner then. It was good to see them. It was great to have them in town. We had some business to take care of as well. So it was a good time to have them here. But we've got a lot to talk about and only 1 hour to do it in. So let's get the show on the road. And we might as well start off with what I was going to lead Monday off with. But now that we've had a few days to stew and digest over it, I think that's probably a good thing. And that was the U.S. national team's victory over Mexico in the finals of the CONCACAF Champions League. I'm Alex Fidrashevsky, corner kick right here on Three Rivers Broadcasting, flying solo tonight. Don't have a guest lined up. Mom and Dad drove back today, so I didn't want to try to get Dad to come in, and JJ's still doing his thing with the Cancer Society. We're hoping that we'll have him back here soon, but I'm going to fly solo tonight, kind of like Andy and Jordan did it without me last night. I'm going to do it without anybody here tonight, but we want to talk about the U.S. national team's 3-2 comeback victory over Mexico, CONCACAF Nations League Championship match on Sunday night. If you stayed up late, oh, did you get the treat of treats? It was a wild one, and it was chaotic. It was great. The home team, if you want to say it's the United States, though it was, I would say, a decidedly pro-Mexico crowd, as most of these USA-Mexico games that aren't played in Columbus, Ohio are. You had the swarm from El Tri, and it was crazy. It was a great game, and you had a goal in the 89th minute to push it to extra time. It had all the high drama that you could possibly have asked for in a USA-Mexico game. I think that while it may not have the highest of stakes because the Nations League has essentially replaced a lot of friendlies, It's still met all of, I think, everyone's hopes and expectations for what a USA-Mexico game could be because they both brought their A teams. And we learned quite a bit about the United States, and it's that the kids, and we've been talking about this for a while on this program, that we needed to kind of bleed the kids, the 18 to 22-year-olds who were bypassing Major League Soccer or quickly exiting Major League Soccer to go play in Europe. We found out that these kids got the guts that the generation ahead of them didn't have. These kids who have bypassed a now stagnant Major League Soccer. I don't care what the marketing says or what the New York home office says or what any of the other locals, the other local offices of the MLS say, the other franchises about it being this, that, we're a top league and our passing statistics are among the blah, 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 blah. No. Sorry. You're not going to get past the real fans with your, OptaJack passing stats. Because at the end of the day, you got 3 strikers from Poland who are very mediocre in Europe, tearing Major League Soccer to pieces. And the Polish league is, compared to what it was 10 years ago, where Lech Poznań, Legia Warsaw, Śląsk Wrocław, Wisła Kraków were making runs into European group stage competition and pulling off some real shocker upsets, or even 5 years ago when Legia and Poznań were still doing it. The Polish league right now, it's down. It's junk right now. It's bad. I'm going to call it what it is. It's really substandard. They're underachieving over there. And 3 guys from Poland have come here and taken Major League Soccer to the cleaners over the last 2 years. Buksa in New England, Niezgoda prior to being injured in Portland, and the best one of the bunch was Kasper Przybyłko, who's in Philadelphia. So to kind of put that all back together, these young kids who bypassed this stagnant league that we have here domestically and went at 18, 19 years old, some of them even younger, bypassing MLS Academy setups altogether, and are now playing at some of the most powerful clubs in Europe, showed that they have the guts that the group ahead of them didn't. Your Michael Bradleys and your Josie Altidores and your Alejandro Bedoyas and all those guys, who came back early for the big payday. And part of that also falls on MLS because they were willing to pay these guys, Bradley and Josie, pay them $6 and $7 million a year to come back while they were still in their prime from Europe. And when you go to a place like Toronto or Philadelphia and you're that $3 million, $5 million, $7 million off-budget guy, the marquee player, there's no threat for your spot. You don't get relegated if you don't make, you finish last. So there's really no pressure. And that's something even European players who came here at the end of their careers had said. Matteo Ferrari was pretty open about it when he was leaving Montreal, when he was retiring, saying, the last 12 games meant nothing for us. And there was no need to try because what was the point? So anyway, these guys who went and put themselves into the meat grinder and tested themselves at a young age, it paid off in the tight spot, the home away game against Mexico, where they got outplayed for a good swath of the match, largely because of some bad tactics from the manager. And if you went on soccer Twitter after the match, during the match, myself and a lot of other people said if the U.S. wins this game, they're going to have won this game because these kids are all right, and it's going to be in spite of the gaffer. Because Tata outcoached Greg Berhalter from the opening kick. And it paid off 90 seconds into the game when Mexico was up 1-0. We're on our back foot already. And then throw in the fact that, Mile High was only half full. Well, you're still in a hostile environment. And these tournament finals are set up, and I get it. CONCACAF, all these groups, they do it to make money. But it ain't a home game just because it's in America. They go play these games in L.A., in Denver, in Houston, and in Dallas. You might as well just go to Azteca. So it was, the home-away game. So the last thing you need in your home-away game is to come out and give one up in a minute and a half. Berhalter didn't have them ready. They were down a minute and a half into the game. Thankfully, these guys got through that game on the grit that they learned over there. These young, hungry guys looking to prove themselves went over and got into it for a game like this because they needed to dig deep once to tie. Then they needed to dig deep again because they gave up a goal in the 79th minute. And then they had to get one back to get it to overtime. And I think the guy who scored the goal that tied the game, Weston McKennie, was, if I was going to grade the players on the night, I would say he was the best player on the field for either team by a country mile. If I was going to grade Weston McKennie, I'd give him, Dave Portnoy does his pizza reviews, one bite, everybody knows the rules, 7-2. If I was going to grade these players, 22-year-old from Little Elm, Texas, gets a 9-7. He was nearly flawless. Plays for Juventus in Italy. And he had a hand in every good thing that happened that night. And I think we learned that Weston McKennie could be a guy who can be the do-it-all in the central part of midfield. Did a great job. Conversely, we had to suffer through a performance from Colorado Rapids. Didn't get shipped out of MLS in his age prime now midfielder Kellen Acosta. The first half hour was awful. He was awful in the first half hour. He did a little bit better after that. He found some ways to play the ball forward. He put in some heavy defensive work later on, but he didn't close out Diego Lainez on the second goal. He got bailed out by Weston McKennie on, a couple minutes later, but he struggled. First half for Christian Pulisic was okay. Second half was much better. And then ice in his veins. In extra time, the U.S. gets a penalty kick. Now, it was a handball. They didn't call it. That was the tackle they didn't call. The U.S. was the handball, and they went and reviewed it. There was a tackle in the box. There was a second tackle in the box on Pulisic. Referee let it go. They went upstairs because the referee's smart. He knew, and this is me trying to get in the referee's head. Referee knew that if he blew that penalty kick, crowd would have went nuts. He passed the buck down to the camera to let the review make the call, and that's the bailout for the ref. That hey, if the fans are upset, hey, we went to the camera. That's all I can do. Pulisic, with everything on the line, steps up and roofed the penalty kick that would prove to be the winner in the match. He stepped up with confidence. You could watch the way his run up, he took just 2 steps and he drilled it with the confidence that you would want your penalty kick taker, because most teams have a designated guy that takes most of the penalty kicks. He stepped up with the confidence that you want your PK man to take. Though he had the winner and McKennie played out of his mind good, neither one of them's the man of the match. Because the man of the match is Ethan Horvath, the United States goalkeeper. Horvath started the match on the bench as Zach Steffen from Manchester City was in the squad this time, and Steffen went down with an injury. Horvath came in. There was nothing he could do about that goal from Lainez. Nothing he could do. That was defensive gaff. Not so much. That's not his issue. He also got run by one of the Mexican players, but the responsibility of that slide tackle from the Mexican player that contacted Horvath's chest, the responsibility for that one falls on John Brooks, who didn't shield the man off. Now, at the same time, Brooks should have taken him and tried to shield him. At that juncture in the game, that guy would have thrown himself to the ground trying to look for a penalty kick. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other. Did he leave Horvath hanging? Yes, but at the same token, should he have taken the body? Yes, but if he didn't, if he did, would the guy have thrown himself to the ground? 1,000%. There's nothing you could do on that goal. He shook it off, and he made save after save after save down the stretch that kept the U.S. in this thing. And then on one of the last kicks of the game, there's a penalty for Mexico because of the handball, and they go upstairs, and you knew it. If you were watching at home, you knew it right away. You saw what happened, and I sat there on the couch. It was almost 1 a.m. I was like, they're going upstairs. That's a penalty kick. And he caps off the win by stopping Andres Guardado's penalty kick. Massive, massive stop. Horvath's performance in that match coming off the bench is the type of performance that can earn him a transfer this summer. Now, he already plays at Club Bruges, who are a very, very big club in Belgium. Big club. But his playing time waned last 2 years. He was the starter for a better part of a year and a half. Last year and a half, not so much. So does he get a move somewhere if he continues this type of form? I think he could. But on the whole, these guys that got in there, no, it was another good shift from Reggie Cannon late. Tyler Adams knows how to come into a game. They brought him in, and first thing he does is goes into a tackle. It's what you want. Everybody did. The team did it on guts because they didn't play badly, but they didn't all play, I think, to their potential. Mark McKenzie struggled, I think, a lot. Defender from Genk, previously the Philadelphia Union. But they got through the game on guts, and that was something you used to see out of the U.S. national team in the 90s when it was largely the Jersey crew that carried them. You had Tab Ramos and Claudio Reyna, Tony Meola, Richie Williams, all those other John Harkes, all those guys who are from Harrison and Kearney. But that whole group, as much as I get annoyed by what he says on TV these days, Alexi Lawless, he was tough. Marcelo Balboa, gutsy defender, not the most talented, but gutsy as all hell. Those guys advanced out of the group stage in 94 in the United States when the World Cup was here, not on talent. It was half guts and half luck. They got to 98, the World Cup in 98, just on guts. Because that's really the first cycle I remember of the U.S. national team. And they were outmanned in almost every game, and they just grinded their way to results down in Central America and tried to pip everybody at home. And it came down to needing to get a win in Vancouver against Canada at what essentially amounted to a high school stadium, and it worked itself out for them. But again, they got there on guts. The 0-2 team, same thing. Somewhere around, I'd say 2010, something changed. And for a good 2 cycles, it wasn't there. And I think there was also the problem once Jurgen Klinsmann came in, where I think he was at odds with U.S. soccer and said everybody needs to go to Europe if you want to really push this thing on to the next level. Kids need to go earlier. And these guys who are staying in MLS and taking the $1 million, $2 million contracts need to go fight for a roster spot over there instead of staying in Kansas City like Graham Zusi and Matt Beasler did. Eventually lost them the locker room because there were a bunch of MLS guys in there. But he laid the groundwork for this group to get out and go and said, if you really want to make a run in a World Cup, this is how you do it. And as far as, again, me saying they did it on guts, Greg Berhalter showed how tactically, I don't want to say inept because he did a good job with the Columbus Crew. He's just not ready to be a national team manager. And I said that from when he was hired, and it was a family deal. It was you could say it was nepotism. It was a brothers, friends, and in-laws hiring process that saw Greg Berhalter get this job. And there were things he did during that game that were head scratchers. You know, a formation change where you take out Dest, who he didn't have the best game, the kid from Barcelona. Just 20 years old, though, let's remember that. And you push your slowest player to the left side of a back three. Tim Ream, the oldest guy on the roster. And the only one over 30. The only guy over 30 on that roster was Tim Ream. After him, there were two 28-year-olds, John Brooks and Sebastian Lletget. Everybody else, 20, 21, 18, 22, 23, 22. So you did that, and it was one of those moments where you sit there and go, what are you doing, Greg Berhalter? I understand you wanted to go to a 3 in the back, but to take off one of your fastest players and then shove your slowest player out there who's been burned playing the left side before when they've platooned him at left back instead of his more natural center back position. To their credit, these guys figured it out and did it on guts. Now, if you go and ask certain people in the soccer world, you could see it all over Twitter around the game where people, there were certain people, specifically guys that work for the league, kind of towing the company line, and people were going at them. And part of me says, well, maybe that's what they think, or maybe it's just the company line. But, there was all this props to Greg Berhalter. He got the job done. Greg Berhalter didn't do a thing to win that game. His players did it on guts, which is something the U.S. hasn't had to face with Mexico in a while. The Mexicans, you could see as we kept coming, they would punch, and we'd punch them back and punch them back and punch them back. Their team's not used to seeing that from the United States. They're used to Michael Bradley walking to take a corner kick in the 90th minute in Trinidad, sitting there going, oh, I'm Zen Michael Bradley. Yeah, well, nobody cared because he didn't make the World Cup. That's what they've gotten used to. They got used to these guys from MLS who were a step too slow, who were complacent, who were making so much money in a league where they didn't have to try, that the national team was just something they had to do. And I'm sure if one of them sits in front of me, they would say, oh, no, we cared. You didn't care in Trinidad. Hell, they made the trainers carry them across the waterlogged track because they didn't want to get their precious little boots wet. Versus these guys who went and got stuck in on every challenge. It's a new day for the U.S. national team. It's a new day because this is the A team now. What you saw in the last week and a half, even in the 2-1 loss to Switzerland in St. Gallen, is a gutsy team. Look, they got there, too, against Honduras. In spite of Greg Berhalter, they won that game on a goal in the 89th minute from Jordan Siebatcheu. Who plays for Young Boys in Switzerland. I'm going to go ahead and say that if you had the other squad, the one that didn't make the World Cup last time, or even if you had the current MLS kind of all-star DP marquee designated player squad, they don't beat Honduras. They would have lost that game because it's a guts thing. And that's the punchline of what I'm talking about here tonight with the U.S. national team. The kids that have gone to Europe, they're tough. And it's something that's been missing from the national team. And there are other players who are coming up that are going to be in the same boat. We have kids now at Roma, at Bayern Munich, all over the place. And we saw Julian Green against Switzerland in the squad there from Greuther Fürth. There are, again, other players, young players. Luca Della Torre is in Europe. Owen Otasowie plays for Wolves. He's 20 years old. These guys, Johnny Cardoso, 19, is at Internacional in Brazil. Matthew Hoppe, Schalke. Conrad De La Fuente, 19, Barcelona. This is the future. And this is what Klinsmann was talking about years ago when he said, you want to be good, this is what you got to do. Essentially, you got to have a depth chart that's 40 deep, 40, maybe even 45 deep over there. The U.S. is starting to get towards that number with these young kids. Because you have players like Ulysses Lainez at Heerenveen. Sebastian Soto plays for Norwich. Nicolas Jocchini plays for Cannes. And others who are over there. Christian Capis, Hobro in Denmark. And others. Eric Palmer Brown, Austria Vienna. Even a couple of goalkeepers. Odunze's 18, Leicester City. CJ Dos Santos, Benfica, 20. And for the game that mattered, in the tournament that mattered, the game that mattered, they got the job done. I think there was some protection, and also travel was tough, so they couldn't get friendlies. But there was a little bit of protection done for Berhalter's sake over the course of the last like 6 months. Panama, El Salvador, Trinidad, really just hammering these teams down in Florida. It was a very odd situation because obviously travel was still restricted and things like that, so we didn't really get a good look because you didn't get the kids. This time we got the kids, and we could see what they can do. And then they piggybacked that win over Mexico with a dominating win against Costa Rica. Thumped them last night in front of a great crowd at Rio Tinto in Salt Lake City. It's great to see fans back in the stands. We need them back in the stands for good. Soccer without supporters was just brutal to watch. There was actually a good swath of last year where I didn't watch. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't sit down and watch an empty stadium Bundesliga game or an empty stadium Premier League game. It was probably only in the last 2 weeks when they started letting people back in the stadiums that I really dove back into this. But it was a great week for the U.S. players. And I think it was smart that they put this extra game on after the two big emotional roller coasters that they had to go through with Honduras and with Mexico, to then have to come back and play Costa Rica, 2 days later, who's always a pretty tough side. And beat them the way the United States beat them says something, again, about these young kids. They're at another level talent-wise, and they're at another level when it comes to their preparedness and their ability to bite and fight and claw, and that's going to be important because when you get into World Cup qualifying coming later this year, the stadiums are going to be open again all over the world. And we're going to have to go down into Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula and San Jose. And, you're going to go into all of these Central American stadiums and have to grind out a result. They're going to put you on the back foot. Costa Rica will play you at night because it's Costa Rica does things, I think, on a very professional level. Their national stadium is beautiful. Dare I say they're a little less scary because it's not at the Monster anymore. It's Saprissa. And they're playing in a shiny new stadium with a track in between, and the fans aren't sitting right on top of you. Maybe a little bit, but still a great team. That you're gonna just because we beat them 4-0 here in a friendly, you get them down there in a World Cup qualifier, very different story. They're gonna make you play, but you're gonna go to Honduras. They're going to essentially make the game a national holiday. The night before, there will be firecrackers going off and drums in the streets outside of the U.S. hotel the entire night, so you don't sleep. It's a very big mental game. And then they're going to play the game like they do this. They've done this to Canada 2 or 3 times now. Normally, you play a World Cup qualifier. It's 7 o'clock at night, and it's a TV deal. They played a game at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it is about 97 degrees with 97% humidity. So you're going to go down there and have to gut through a game like that. And we talk about this every cycle. How tough are we? How tough are we? I think we have a crop now where there's enough talent and enough depth that they can start going down to Central America and taking 3 points in these games and not trying to nick a draw. because I think what we're starting to see talent-wise is with these young guys, the United States is a step ahead now from some of these teams and should be. Will it make it easy down there? No, but they have the guts mentality. They have the toughness that, again, Reyna and Harks and Miola and all of those guys had. Eric Winalda, Tom Dooley. I mean, these guys went into the most hostile environments, and they could grind it out. I remember the game at Azteca. I think it was for 98 qualifying when they nicked the draw in Azteca. And about 50 minutes into the game, the crowd started to turn on their own team. As the U.S. just fought and fought and fought, they started to cheer the American team in Estadio Azteca, Mexico City. And as the U.S. was playing keep away later in the game, their fans, all 100,000 of them, were almost mocking their team at that point. Every time the U.S. would complete a touch, one player to another, ole, the whole stadium. And that was that chant is used in Azteca to mock the opponent as Mexico's playing with the ball. They'll do that the whole game. And they did that against their own team because those guys had that much guts. We might have a group that's like that again, that can go into Estadio Azteca and turn the crowd. That can go to Honduras at 2:30 in the afternoon when it's 200 degrees and pick a win. And it was interesting to see a lot of people saying was what we saw last night, the roster we saw last night, most of these guys that started the match, were they the B team? Was that the U.S. B team? Because it wasn't the same 11 that beat Mexico and really went toe-to-toe with Honduras. There were a lot of the same players out there, and I wouldn't say it really was the B team because they just did it was largely just squad rotation in this friendly. McKinney, Pulisic, Sargent didn't play. Yedlin didn't play. But Desi, Bachua, Costa, Reyna, Ewell, and Walker Zimmerman came in off the bench. They brought him in to replace Miazga. But, okay, so maybe they went to the second 11. Reem Robinson, but you still have, Reem Robinson, McKenzie, Cannon, Leggett, Adams, Aronson, Musa was from Valencia, Weah, and then Daryl Dike. This is the one that everybody's talking about right now. Daryl Dike is 21 years old. He went to the University of Virginia for a year, I believe. I think it was 1 year. He went to University of Virginia. He was taken by Orlando. He had a decent year last year for Orlando in the kind of truncated season. He scored 8 goals in 17 games, which for a first-year pro who's coming out of college at that age, you don't usually see. Now, he comes from a soccer family. His older brother is Bright Dike. He played for Notre Dame and then ended up in MLS for a few years and also played a year at Amkar Perm in Russia. His sister also played for the Nigerian women's team, and he's a cousin of one of Nigeria's better players over the last, I'd say, 10 years, Emmanuel Emenike. So he comes from this background. But Daryl Dike went to Barnsley on loan in the Championship, the second division in England. If you're just joining us and you're new to the game here on Three Rivers Broadcasting, he went there and he absolutely tore apart the Championship. He had 9 goals in 19 games. He played unbelievably well on loan to Barnsley. Now, there was a $20 million release clause that was set up on this, along with a sell-on fee. That Barnsley, I think we knew wasn't going to trigger, no matter how well he played, because I think it was a bit asinine to even set it that high. But I get what what MLS's office is trying to do right now. They need big hits. to try to keep up the marketing game. DK's really probably, I would say right now at his age, he's probably, because he's still relatively unproven in spite of this run at Barnsley, he's probably like a $10 million guy, maybe $8 to $10 million. He's got a high ceiling. I think he's like an $8 to $10 million with a 25%, 30% sell on type of guy. If Orlando gets a fair offer of, I think, over that, 8 to 10 million, and the league doesn't move him, it is a disservice to Daryl DK. DK got a goal just before halftime, put in 75 minutes. And again, that's what everybody was waiting for. His movement's great. His physicality is great. I would give him an A on physicality. 6'1", big-bodied striker. Kind of reminds me of what Josie Altidore was doing at that age. The key here is going to be to get DK over to Europe. And sooner than later. And he will add another big gun to the now stacked U.S. attack that has players at Werder Bremen and Borussia Dortmund and Chelsea and Red Bull Salzburg and Young Boys and all these other clubs. And I think we'll see more of DK in the Gold Cup, which will be taking place in just about a month's time. July 11th, the U.S. kicks off the Gold Cup. They'll play their whole group stage in Kansas City. They have Martinique, Canada, who's coming on, and a team to be determined right now based off of a kind of a qualification system. They're waiting to finalize who the extra team's going to be out of the preliminary stages. They are currently in kind of the first round of the preliminary stages. That's going to be played in early July in Fort Lauderdale over the course of like 2 days. And the teams that are involved in that are almost exclusively Caribbean, and Guatemala's in there as well. The teams to really watch are going to be Haiti, Trinidad, probably Guatemala, and potentially Guadeloupe, depending on what kind of a roster they can cobble together from players who are over in France. We'll see what happens with Bermuda and who comes in for them if they can get the full squad, which they didn't have against Aruba, Canada, Suriname. They didn't really have the big guns in that game, in those games, or even where they lost to Suriname here, 6-0 with this new Dutch national team that Suriname pulled out. Could they make the Gold Cup again? It's possible. I don't want to say they can't, because if they get the right draw all the way through, all they got to do is win on the first day and win on the second day. So if they can draw potentially, let's say, Cuba, they could get there. Bermuda could get past Cuba if they got their full team. That, for a small island, it would be very impressive. But anytime they do something, but if they can get Reggie Lamb in the squad from England, Naki Wells, who's a championship player, Zako Lewis from the Charleston Battery here in the USL, King Critchlow, Watford, they get those guys and then they could do something. So that's the kind of teams that the U.S. are waiting on. I think when we go to that tournament, and Berhalter already said this, and it's one of the few things I actually agree with the guy on, squad rotation coming in big time. You're probably going to see a MLS heavy, if not MLS exclusive roster. I wouldn't expect to see anybody in the starting 11 from the last couple of games involved in that, and I don't think you'll see any of them in general involved in that. Maybe you'll get Walker Zimmerman, because he wasn't as involved. He only was called in for the one game and just played a touch. Jackson Ewell from San Jose, Sebastian Lletget, and Kellen Acosta. Okay, that's possible, those three. Maybe the MLS guys, the 4 MLS guys, and Daryl Dike. Definitely lock it up. Daryl Dike is probably starting up top for the U.S. in the Gold Cup. Who else is in the roster? Your guess is as good as mine right now. They could surprise. They could surprise and bring these guys back, but that'll burn their legs, and I don't think you want to do that, especially when you have such a clogged schedule this year. It's a lot of games here in 2021 because you could have 5 in the Gold Cup. Then you got 3 qualifiers in September, 3 qualifiers in October, 2 qualifiers in November. Then there's January. It's not a friendly this year because of the Qatar World Cup with all of its controversy that they still allowed to go on. But January's not going to be MLS friendly against Jamaica, where it's Jamaican League guys against MLS guys who are in preseason, and they kind of just mess around in that camp. It's a Camp Cupcake. There's World Cup qualifiers in January and in February, and then again a trio in March. So this is a packed year for these national teams. And the fact that the U.S. has now built itself this depth in Europe, that's great on the qualifying end. Now, on the flip side, for a tournament like the Gold Cup, you can use the MLS guys. Though, again, maybe they bring in some of these other young players and just throw them into the deep end and see what happens with Brian Reynolds, who's at Roma right now, Justin Che, Bayern Munich, with their reserve team just 17 years old. Or, does a Luca Della Torre get called in? Or an Otis Sowie from Wolves. They'll be in their preseason after an odd year and a half, but is it an opportunity to see Richard Ledesma from PSV? Or Johnny Cardoso? Yeah, could be. Could be. Matthew Hoppe, does he get his debut from Schalke? It's possible. Could you see Tyler Boyd get brought in? Maybe. But my guess is it's going to be probably a more MLS-heavy roster. Does that mean that Sean Johnson might be in goal from New York City? Maybe. Or do they go younger? Does David Ochoa, who was in this last squad, does David Ochoa from Salt Lake get the nod as the starter? Are we past Sean Johnson, Bill Hamid in net as the MLS goalkeepers? We got a handful of them overseas now. I think we need a couple more of them, but is this the tournament where we see JT Marcinkowski from San Jose at 24 get his debut? Or Matt Turner from the New England Revolution at 26. Does he get a chance to make his name as the third keeper? Because I think we know Stefan and Horvath are 1 and 2. And there's a few guys on their way up who could be the number 3. I think Ochoa is probably in the lead right now, but can a guy like Turner or Marcinkowski make a statement? Yeah. Yeah. I think, again, in the defense and these other positions, we'll probably see a lot of MLS guys as long as they continue to play well. Tanner Tessman from Dallas, who's 19 years old, another one of those move them along kind of guys, would be someone to take a look at. And he's actually Dabo Sweeney's godson. Clemson football. He was going to go to play soccer and kick at Clemson and instead signed with Dallas. I think he's got a bright future overseas. And there's a benefit, too, to this MLS crop right now, even these guys who are here. And I know I beat up on MLS a lot. These guys that are 18, 19, 20, it's the crop that can move and join the other 30 of them overseas. Cole Bassett, 19, Colorado Rapids. Frankie Amaya, age 20, New York Red Bulls. Do you go and bring in Caden Clark? I know he's only a high schooler still from New York Red Bulls. Do you bring in a player like Clark, who's played very, very well since joining them? You could consider it. There's options for Greg Berhalter domestically to put together a squad of prospects and not have to go to guys who are 26, 27, 28, 30 years old. Of MLS guys, the next group of the guys who are 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, where they could go make that move still. He could potentially put that type of a roster together, and if they show well, maybe 3 or 4 of them do get to go, and then they join that big crop. And I think that could be your long-term hope and goal for the U.S. setup, is that you could have 30 or 40 of these guys or 50 of these guys over there, and you can really pick from that crop, and then have another 20, another full squad here of guys coming up that make up your Gold Cup squads. Or, Camp Cupcake, you stop calling in those guys into the January camp like your Aaron Longs who are 28, 29. And you only bring in 17 to 22-year-olds for Camp Cupcake because the results in the January friendlies, there's not going to be them this year, but the results in January really don't matter. They don't. You're going to win the games anyway because you're going to play Trinidad and the Bahamas and Belize or whoever. Essentially, whoever they can get for January, you're going to play. It's going to be domestic squad mostly. But I think you can get to that point with the U.S. national team where you have almost 2 teams. The domestic kids that go play in the Gold Cup and some of these other friendlies, and then you got the big guns that you bring in for World Cup qualifying. And in a traditional World Cup qualifying, it's a little different this time. You have that kind of first round World Cup qualifying, most cycles where it is, it'll be like the U.S. in a group with Grenada, the Cayman Islands, and Anguilla. I don't pick another island nation. Barbados. You're gonna win all. You're going 6-0. That's the type of game where you don't need to. That's once you build the depth, you don't have to bring Christian Pulisic to go to Barbados. It'd probably be for the best that you don't take those guys there because the skill level is so different. All you need is somebody to stick their leg out and you got a broken leg or a torn ACL. So you can go there with the better domestic guys who are prospects, take them down there, put in a bunch of goals, come home, back to MLS, and get through that round with the young guys. It gets them exposure. You can cap tie players that way. Get them into your setup. I know they're adding these switch rules and this and that. Oh, one time you can change and this. I don't like it. But they'll just follow the FIFA money. Follow the money at FIFA. See where it ends up. On that rule. Or on the 22 World Cup. Follow the trail. You'll find your answer. But, look, I spent 1 hour just talking about the setup right now, the national team. 2 great games, 3 great games from these kids. They were gutsy. They got the job done. They were tough. I'm almost out of time because we're going to keep it to an hour right now. We'll go to an hour and a half soon, maybe when we get two in here. But I think, again, the U.S. can push itself to this point. They're almost there where you can have 2 teams. And, again, you rest those guys. And if you can save them 6 games in that qualifying cycle where they can stay in Europe, recover, and you don't have to take them down to play Bahamas or St. Kitts or whoever it is that you're going to pound 8 goals in on as the United States anyway. And you can do it with MLS prospects like Frankie Amaya, who's 20 years old. or work in a James Sands from NYC. Tessman and Paul McCall and these other guys from Dallas, these other kids who can go down and beat those teams handily. They can go down there and get the job done against them. They can. They're good enough. Maybe you take one or two reinforcements if you need them, like a Paul Arriola. You can bring them in. A few of those guys if you really need them to get the job done. You know, Christian Roldan, Seattle Sounders midfielder. You can take them down for those games. But the U.S. is getting close where they can have that. I just hope that Greg Berhalter, Ernie Stewart, Brian McBride understand the position that they're starting to get into, which is very advantageous. And if they continue to push these guys out of the country and over to play in Europe, you can set that up where you don't need to bring them all back every single time. And you use them for the hex, which I guess is going to go away. There's going to be like a 60-team World Cup next time. It was 40-something. But, I mean, you know, can't wait to watch Brazil play Fiji in the World Cup. Is that what we're going to go to someday? In the last couple of minutes here, I'll talk about it. Is that what we're going to go to someday? I hate, with a passion, the expansion of the World Cup. 32 is more than enough. It's the elite of the elite, and the beauty of it is in the qualifying that somebody's not going to go. Somebody who should be there isn't going to qualify, but follow the money. Because this isn't about the integrity of the sport. This isn't about expanding soccer. Soccer's the biggest sport in the world. The world. It's the number one youth participation sport in this country. The number one youth participation sport in this country is not basketball, is not football, is not baseball or softball. It's soccer. It's the biggest sport in the world. Just because, and people will say Major League Soccer only gets 10,000 actual attendance, which is actually, I think that's largely true in most markets, but we won't go there. There is a huge soccer market in the United States. Look at the ratings for Liga MX. Look at the ratings for the English Premier League, the Bundesliga. Look how much soccer is accessible on television 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this is around the whole world. So expanding and growing the game ain't the problem here. That's not what this is about. The expanded World Cup is about money. That's all it's about. It's about getting more teams, more markets, more countries, more advertisers, more rights fees paid in more languages in more countries. It's not about the competitiveness of the World Cup. And when you look at the expanded World Cup, and we'll go into it on Monday because I'll be back, we'll break down who's getting more bids for 2026, the 2026 America, Canada, Mexico Tri-World Cup. FIFA's mea culpa for messing up 22. 48 teams. You'll never be able to host a single nation World Cup again with 48 teams unless you play it in the United States. It's the only country big enough to do it by itself. The only one. And we still sought out help to do the try bid from Canada and Mexico to play in Montreal, Toronto, and Edmonton, and then Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. There's going to be a ton of travel, and then all the way across the country. Boston, New York, Philly, Baltimore, D.C., Cincinnati is a World Cup host. Remember that. Cincinnati is our closest here in Pittsburgh. Cincinnati has World Cup games coming in 2026. They're going to be all over the place. But we'll go over it on Monday, who gets more spots. And how they're being distributed. But we're about out of time here on the Corner Kick. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. I guess I could keep going. I mean, I'm the boss. I could keep going, but I think I've about exhausted it for the night. So I'm going to head out of here. And then I will catch you all here tomorrow for Polka at 11 o'clock. And we'll be back at 5 for the Polka Drive at 5. I'll be here Saturday from 9 until noon for the Polka Party. We've got great programming all weekend. We've got the news coming up next, and then it'll be Street Corner Doo-Wop from 7 to 9 with Steve Fox right here on Three Rivers Broadcasting. So I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. God bless each of you. God bless America. And ciao for now from Three Rivers Broadcasting and the